I'm Stylinski. I'm with University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, and I'm going to be presenting with Elena Takaki, who's with National Geographic. And she and I have been working for some time, actually before we started working with and at National Geographic, on using geospatial tools in education environments, primarily in K-12, but moving more into public environments. So what we want to do today is explore a tool that is been created by National Geographic, FieldScope. We want to introduce you to the tool and explore if and how it might be used in the programs that you are all involved with. So we have not too much time today, so what we're going to do is give you just a very brief introduction to the tool. We're going to show you some examples of how it's used in different circumstances. They won't be comprehensive, it'll just be kind of a quick view to give you a sense of potential range of applications that are relevant, we think, to your situation. And then we have a few suggestions to get our discussion started in how you might use it, but then we'll have much more time to talk about that, and we want to hear more about your needs. So Elena and I are going to kind of tag team. I'm going to turn it over to her. She's going to first give you some background about FieldScope, and then we'll jump into some examples.
So FieldScope is the online digital mapping tool that we'll be talking about specifically today. It's all online, so that's definitely one of the advantages, is that one of the issues that Kat and I ran into when we were doing professional development with teachers before is that there was software to install. So for this one, there's no software to install. All you need is an internet access. It is very user-friendly, easy to use. It's designed for student use and citizen science capabilities. Some of the things that it can do, you can do things like enter regular point data, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, visualize patterns, do some data analysis, and then graph the data as well. We have many different projects going on. Each project answers a very specific question that's being investigated here, and we're going to go through some of the projects and some of the visualization and analysis that can be done through FieldScope.
So the first couple ones I'm going to show you are actually comprehensive curricular units we've developed for the classroom, which is not the setting you're working in, but I think some of the ways we're using it are relevant. So the first one I want to show you is mapping our streams. And when we're done here, we have the discussion, we can get on the computers and look at FieldScope a little bit more, but this was a more efficient way to show you. So this is sort of very similar to MBSS, typical stream sampling. The goal is to have a stream site you're interested in, go out into the field, sample at the site, and then use the tool just the way a stream ecologist would use a GIS, use the FieldScope tool to go back, delineate the watershed, and look what's happening in the upstream area and how that might be impacting the stream site and the kind of measurements you're getting. So, so in this case, and this is a middle high school curriculum, but we focus on working with impervious surface. So really getting people to understand that, well, this is what's happening at the site, but that's not the only area that's impacting that site. You need to consider not just any area, but the specific area that drains down to that site. And FieldScope actually, it's a very user-friendly, sort of a novice tool, so it has a feature that allows you to delineate watersheds. We have another project, it's a collaboration with the National Park Service, and it's very similar. They go out, this is Harper's Ferry, they go out to a site again, they do stream sampling, and I'm showing you this one, again to show you that tool that it uses, and in this case we'll look at land use within the watershed. And they use the land use to do a very simple calculation, the percent land use, to calculate surface runoff, very rough calculation of surface runoff, which is a function of the different land uses in the watershed. Next one. And so here you can get a little query and see the different percent covers of the different land use types in the areas. Next one. In this same project, we also do something else you might be thinking about, different ownership within an area. So they compared two different Park Service sites. Here's that one I just showed you. Harper's Ferry, where actually only where they sample is within the national park site, and the entire watershed is in private lands, versus this is Prince William Park, where about half the watershed is maintained by the Park Service. So in this case, we have students considering different land ownerships and who they'd have to work with. So the tool can be very useful and very simple to bring that up. Next one. I wanted to show you a couple works in progress. This is a project we're doing focused on best management practices, and we're working with MAO, the Maryland Association for Environmental Outdoor Education. So they have a green school program, so schools that are doing different types of environmental actions, and they get certified as green schools. So these are all the green school locations. And as you can with the GIS, you can filter. So this is an example of how you might look across different sites and do a comparison of a whole bunch of sites. And then you could do, I'm sorry, it's a little hard to read here, but you could do a filter and say, well, how many of these schools actually have green roofs? So that one we're just starting to develop and play around with that. Next one. The next couple ones we're going to show you are things we want to really encourage you to do. We try to make these projects, as we call them, so each one of these FieldScope resides in a different location, and they're typically driven by a question. So this is a new effort we're starting with a group of educators, both informal and informal education in the Chesapeake area. And everyone's interested in sea level rise. So we're working together as a team to figure out how we can use FieldScope to work with K-12 and the public looking at sea level rise. And so we've been working on a driving question, which is sort of the basic question of how much will sea level rise and what impacts will it have. And we are going to use data from the NOAA Digital Coast program, which eventually will be up in this area, as you probably know. We don't have it yet, so this is from the Gulf. So we've added data from the Gulf into FieldScope. We're starting just to play around with it. And in this case, it's just showing you that this is assuming a 6-foot inundation, pretty intensive. And they've come up with some interesting indices, including this one, which is a social index, so vulnerable populations. So I'm showing you this one because it's a bit of a work in progress, and so how we work through it, we're working with National Geographic, working with the programmer, playing around with what's our question, what data do we need, what functionality do we need. Next one. So this, I think this is the last one I have. This is a brand new program we're starting with American Chestnut. So this is a citizen science effort. If you're not familiar with the term, it's involving citizens with scientists working collaboratively on projects. Sometimes scientist-driven, sometimes citizen-driven. And so here we're looking at American chestnuts and planting them in western Maryland and seeing how they survive. We have American chestnuts from different sources. And really we're using FieldScope as much for community engagement as anything. It's probably not so critical that we have the data in FieldScope for the science research, but it's a way for the citizens to post their sites, to have photographs of their sites, to communicate, to share. So I think it has a value beyond just sort of a data analysis tool. So a public engagement tool is kind of what I just wanted to mention with this one. Next one. Now it's to you.
So another way that we've been using the FieldScope platform is through these projects called Blitzes, and we partner with the National Park Service every year at a different national park, and we go out and we just do BioBlitz. We do a species inventory of flora and fauna. So these are just some of the examples. You can see that you can upload various media, so you could upload sounds, pictures, videos, as well as comments for each of the media. And then what we have here are just different ways of showing how the data can be displayed in terms of species density, species richness, and geographic distribution of the species there. And then it's your typical, it's based off of the Esri platform as well. So it's your typical GIS platform where you have your layers here, some tabs here, the different types of analysis can be done up here. And then, but we've made it very user-friendly by adding limited number of tools and toolbars and data analysis over on this side here. And of course, you can zoom in and out. So as Kat was saying, when we do these BioBlitzes, we have teachers, we have citizens going out, collecting the data, and uploading the data here. So it has to be very intuitive and very user-friendly, which, ArcGIS isn't intuitive, I would say. So this is an example of Rocky Mountain National Park, and one of the types of analysis that you can do, or visual analysis. So here we have a slider bar. I call it the windshield wiper. So you can show change over time. So this is the infestation of the pine bark beetle out in Colorado. And you can see in 2001, it was kind of sparsely spread out, but by 2011, as you slide the bar this way, you can see what's happening and how the distribution of the pine bark beetle has changed in a matter of 10 years. Another organization we're working with is called Project Budburst. Is anyone familiar with Budburst? They measure phenology, and so we're working with them on a larger, they're investigating the issue of climate change to see if plants are budding out at different times, for longer times or earlier, as the climate changes. So they have ordinary people, your neighbors, are outside taking a look at their trees and taking note when these trees are budding out. We call it the green up and brown down phases. So this particular question here within Project Budburst is asking the question, do these two plants, the lilac and the dandelion, are they more sensitive to heat or light? And we have some data collected. What we did was we put a 50-mile radius around the Washington, D.C. area. We selected these two plants, and that's plotting against growing degree days along the y-axis and the photo period, so how long the sun is out along the x-axis. And based on the data here, you can see that the dandelion is much more heat sensitive. And then the lilac is in a circular distribution, so really it's dependent on both heat and light, not one any more than the other necessarily. So again, we're showing all these different types of projects to show you just different ways of displaying visually and analyzing the data. This particular question here is asking, well, when is the maximum flowering point for each of these species here? And so you can see that the Jack in the Pulpit really has a nice range of maximum budding ability there. There we go. All right, so Kat, you want to do the last slide?
So this was very quick. I think probably the fastest we've ever done this kind of presentation. Feels like speed dating. So we wanted to kind of give you a flavor of some of the functionality. We tried to emphasize that FieldScope is organizing these separate projects depending on the topic. It tends to be question driven in terms of how these projects are organized. We don't throw everything in the project. We figure out what's the question, what's the audience, what's going to be done. So this is very customized to the audience's needs. It has various types of functionality. There's simple analysis. It's really a visualization tool. It's not a really comprehensive GIS by any stretch. So it has simple analysis. It's good for looking at patterns. It's good for uploading data. The main data that's currently the only data that can be uploaded is point data. So you're not uploading lines or polygons. And there's simple graphing ability. As Elena was showing you, some interesting things that we're developing more. And of course there's output. There can be maps that are made that are then shared with other audiences. So it's a fine communication tool. So for your applications, we saw sort of two obvious ways to start considering it. One is simply data visualization. For your own applications, it may be a very quick way for you to put something together, show it, and use it for your audiences. And the second is to promote community involvement. And we want to hear a little bit more about, hear more from you all about how you're working with the public and with other folks in the community, and how FieldScope might potentially be a tool to engage them more, to have them share data and interact with you more. So I think the way to think about it is, what are your goals? What are your driving questions? What are the needs of your audience? And then also, what are the needed layers and capacities? And so I guess with that, we'll be happy to take any questions and have a deeper discussion about it.